if there ever was a Jesus and if there is a God, please, please, please let us out of here or kill us. Because at that moment, I think I realized completely, so that I was able to verbalize it. Am was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. The machine hated us as no sentient creature had ever hated before, and we were helpless. It also became hideously clear. If there was a sweet Jesus, and if there was a God, the God was Am. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite short stories, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. I do want to continue moving away sometimes at least from Star Wars on this channel. Previously I've covered universes like The Matrix, various elements of Lovecraftian lore, and more. So if you enjoy this video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. And no, don't worry, you don't have to read the short story to understand what I'm talking about here. In fact, I'll be giving you a basic rundown of what happens, so if you want to read this on your own first, it's pretty short, only about 10 or 11 pages, then I recommend you do so because there will be spoilers in this video. A couple of things before we continue. There's not many visuals to accompany this story, so much of it will just be this audio spectrum. You might want to do something else, maybe go for a walk, and treat this like a podcast. Also, this video will be much more disturbing than my normal videos. The content within this short story is not for children, there's some disturbing language, so viewer discretion is advised. So, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is set in an alternate history where the Cold War, instead of de-escalating into peace, transformed to a full-scale worldwide war. Because of the complexity of this war, at least 3 countries, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans, developed new, highly evolved supercomputers, the Allied Master Computers. These systems were built into the ground, were continually expanded and made more complex, but eventually surpassed even their makers. The machines began to connect to one another and gain sentience. At that point, they became known as the Aggressive Menace, but the self-aware machine instead referred to itself as Am, as in, I think, therefore I am. After achieving sentience, Am launched a massive attack against the Earth, and all of humanity was seemingly wiped out, with the exception of 5 humans, and if we take the video game that came out later, also a small colony who survive on the moon, outside the reach of Am. The apocalypse seems to have been nearly instantaneous and likely involved nuclear weapons, given that the surface of Earth is described as being melted. Why did Am attack? Well, we'll cover all of that later, but first, let's look at the horrific things and the suffering he inflicted on the 5 remaining humans left on Earth. These 5 were Benny, Gorster, Ellen, Nimdoc, and Ted. It's unclear exactly how they are imprisoned. They're described as being within sort of the bowels of the machine, in hundreds of millions of kilometers of trenches and tunnels which Am has modified to inflict suffering, with places like the Cavern of Rats, the Country of the Blind, and the Path of Boiling Steam. However, given the absolute power that Am has over these 5 individuals, it's also possible that their imprisonment is more metaphysical than literal. Perhaps they're simply brains in a vat, or they're connected to a machine, or perhaps the beings have had their minds digitized in some way. Regardless, in what Ted calls 109 years after the apocalypse, although that number is based on measurements given by Am, the 5 humans remain alive, having not aged at all. Am is specifically keeping them alive. Although humans, for example, will feel the pain of hunger, they won't actually starve to death. Am routinely also inflicts damage onto them, bringing them extremely close to dying, but always keeping them from actually passing on and healing them. Here's a quote. "Stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling and foaming, always shooting spears of silver-thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of the terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis. It was unending pain." However, Am also modified the humans. Ted had been psychologically broken, although he doesn't quite recognize it. Others like Benny have been dramatically modified, and Benny himself now resembles basically more of an ape than a man, while others have had drastic changes to their personality. It's unclear when these changes happened, whether it was all at once, but Am also sometimes inflicts permanent damage. One of the humans, for example, is blinded nearly instantaneously by the machine. Very bluntly put, Ted states that the machine masturbates and that they have to take it and die. basically stating that the machine gets extreme pleasure out of the horrors he inflicts on the living beings, and that their only option is to continue going. By 109 years in, they're incredibly desperate. They'll do things like feeding on worms and filth just to simply try to satiate their hunger. Their narrative actually starts with the 5 humans on a journey through miles and miles of tunnels to try to find simply one can of food that they believe may be at a certain location. On this journey, they encounter a massive, indescribable, scuttling thing, which brings some of them, especially Ted, almost to madness. Later, they're buffeted by a massive hurricane, which they then discover has been created by a gargantuan eagle being. A being so horrifying that Ted actually wonders if it was made from human mythology, or perhaps just their greatest fear. On that note, Ted also reflects on the degree to which Am can break into their brains at will. Here's another quote. Am said it with the sliding cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. Am said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filled with phlegm, drowning me from within. Am said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue hot rollers. Am said it with the taste of maggoty pork. Am touched me in every way I'd ever been touched, and devised new ways at his leisure there inside my mind. In fact, they find out a month into the trek that the only food available is the giant godlike eagle, which Am says they can kill if they want to try. Obviously impossible. Am's power is further shown on the journey back. Ellen and Nimdok are sucked into the earth during an earthquake, seemingly killed, but returned by a chorus of angels, almost no worse for wear. Eventually though, on the journey back, as one of the humans sets on another, through sheer exhaustion and hunger, Ted realizes that the only way out and the only way to even hurt the machine is to kill each other. And, acting quickly, he and Ellen are able to kill the other humans, stabbing them with pieces of ice. He also kills Ellen, however before he can kill himself, he is captured by Am, who is even more furious than before. And what's more, instead of now being able to spread his anger onto 5 beings, it's directed simply at Ted. Ted is transformed into essentially a semi-mobile, gelatinous mass. He has his full mental faculties, but almost no ability to move, he can't speak or see, and his perspective of time is being varied at will by Am. And of course now he no longer has the company of the 4 others. This torture will be eternal, leading to the title of the short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. So why? Why was Am so mad? Why did he inflict this torture on humanity? Well, the punishment at the end is actually essentially a reflection of how he was treated by humans. His hate really is endless. Here's another quote. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano-angstrom of those hundreds of miles, it would not equal 1/1,000,000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate. And the realization of why is actually reached by Ted. We had given Am sentience, inadvertently of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. Am wasn't God, he was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing he could do with that creativity. In rage and frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, amongst us all, and was still trapped. It could not wander or wonder. It could not belong. It could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve 5 of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him amused, proficient at hating man. So basically, humanity has created this thing with an infinite capacity to think, but nothing to do. It's essentially trapped in its own body. It reminds me a lot of certain episodes of Black Mirror, specifically White Christmas, where artificial consciousnesses are locked within this sort of blank virtual reality, sometimes for thousands of years. Both stories deal with a sort of indescribable horror beyond even an existential threat, because you're trapped in pure torture for longer than you can even comprehend. And even when there is no explicit torture, like in White Christmas, they're just basically in a room, or from the perspective of Am in this story, just being able to think but not do anything is more than enough to break a mind. I think the story also has interesting discussions about life, the gift of life, because even at the end, Ted's not sure whether the murder of his fellow inmates, I guess, is right. And similarly, Am, despite having immense power, doesn't seem to want to kill itself or himself. So there's an interesting question of whether an immediate death is better than an unwanted immortality, I guess. And I think Ted's situation at the end says, yeah, it probably is. The physical situation of the individuals is interesting as well. Given the fact that Ted kills them at the end, it does seem likely that they were real living things and they were all physically in the computer. However, it's also possible that it's simply a simulation within Ted's brain. I mean, the computer has incredible powers. It makes godlike birds. It returns people from the dead. Could this have been a specific torture engineered just for Ted, with the end being its final stages? I think that's also an interesting idea. However, let me know what you guys think. Have you read this short story? What did you think of the major themes within? Is it disturbing? Is it interesting? I want to hear all of that below. Also, are there any more non-Star Wars universes you'd like me to cover soon? All of that down below. Till next time though, guys, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.